So we're at the beginning of the fifth parak of Melachim Alef, but like many prakim, the break is in an awkward place. So we're actually the last couple of psukim in chapter 4. So page 407 of the Koren Tanakh, using another Tanakh. It's again Melachim Alef, that's Book of Kings, number 1, chapter 4. And I look always in the Koren Tanakh personally because I like the fact that it tells you where the actual paragraphing is in the Masoretic text. In terms of where there are tab spaces and ends of paragraphs and the like. The last thing we learned last week was about the different, call them governors or tax collectors, each one responsible for another area in Eretz Yisrael. We saw the map. We saw that it was an expanded border. We'll look at that again today, a little bit more in depth. The first thing to see are the Pasukim just at the end, Pasuk Yud Tet, the last word on the line for me on page 407. Gever ben Uri be'eretz Gilad, Eretz Sichon melech ha'emori, ve'og melech ha'bashan. It refers to someone, Gever ben Uri. Eretz ha'Gilad is today what you call the east bank of the Jordan. The east bank of the Jordan refers to what's today Jordan and Syria, actually. The northern part of Syria. In the biblical era, that's called the Eretz ha'Gilad. Remember, it was already conquered by the Jewish people in 2 defensive wars. It was not wars. These were not wars of expansion. They were not. The goal of them was simply and exclusively to defend themselves when these other nations decided to come out and make war against the Jewish people. That's Sichon melech ha'emori and Og melech ha'bashan, 2 kings who were on the east bank of the Jordan. So that's called Eretz ha'Gilad. There was therefore control still to this time. It's a lot more to discuss another time about how Ammon and Moab were somehow still there in that vicinity, but Gilad is a little bit farther north. There it's a Gilad, and they needed a governor. The end of the perek, Unitziv echad asher ba'aretz, and there was one nitziv, meaning one representative who was in the land. And it's not clear what this one representative in the land, who is that, who's not named, and is mentioned as an aside almost after we've learned about the 12 different governors that are in each of the different regions. Yehuda and Israel rabim kachol asher al hayam larov, ochlim v'shotim usmechim. Yehuda and Israel, we know, just you don't need to be a scholar of Bible to see, Yehuda and Israel are already being referenced as 2 separate entities, even though I thought it's one united nation. And so it is a united nation, but the line is still there. As we saw last time, that distinction is already made plain by the fact that the 12 governors are in all regions, but they're not in Eretz Yehuda. They're not in the allotment of Yehuda, which is curious. And I suggested, as others already did before me, Avram Grossman and various others, probably a harbinger of things to come, that, so to speak, the family fight between Yehuda and Yisrael is not going to be solved or resolved in a permanent way just because Shlomo HaMelech has taken his place as the successor to David HaMelech, Shevet Yehuda, as the kingly tribe. We know it's a lot more complicated than that. And we learn here that they are eating and drinking and merry. M-E-R-R-Y. They're very happy. Smeichim, the simcha. He rules in all of the kingdoms. Mina nahar, eretz plishtim, v'ad gvul mitzrayim. Magishim mincha v'ovdim et Shlomo kol yemei chayav. We learned that Shlomo rules in all of the different kingdoms from the river and to Eretz, the river. And then we have Eretz Plishtim, and then we have until the Gvul Mitzrayim. Everyone's bringing a tribute. They're paying him. They're paying taxes. They serve Shlomo all of the days that he lives. So he is extremely powerful. It's made plain to us in these very psukim. Yeah, we're seeing that. That's what's transpiring, and it's quite obvious that is the case. You can see it before our very eyes. Okay, now there's something here about borders that we should recognize is actually, I guess, unfolding before us that tells us about something, perhaps about a fulfillment of promises that were made earlier in Tanakh. First of all, the description of the Jewish people here as the sand of the sea. Does that sound familiar? The Jewish people described as sand of the sea. The first time the Jewish people are described as possibly the sand of the sea. I'll give you a hint. It's in the news this week, in our world at least. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak your mind. Where are we referred to as the sand of the sea? The Jewish people here are called the sand of the sea. Any takers?
Yeah. Whoops. Wrong.
Can't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what Hashem told Abraham.
Exactly. It's in Parshat Lech Lecha. So if you turn back in your Tanakh to chapter 13 of Sefer Bereshit, which we know very well, some of us on this call, we learned on Monday, in the Monday Shiur, when we started Lech Lecha way back when, so it's maybe a year, maybe two ago. Time runs together, and COVID has destroyed my ability to keep time. So could have been a year ago or 2 years ago, sometime before COVID. Look at chapter 13, verse 14. Avram Avinu and Lot separate from each other. I mean, again, Genesis, it's Bereshit, chapter 13, verse 14. Hashem amar al Avram, achrei pared Lot me'imo, sanai nechurei min hamakom asher tasham, tzafona v'negba v'kedma v'yama. Look north, look south, look east, look west. Look up and see it. Ki et kol haaretz asher ta ro'eh, l'cha etnenu l'chzaracha ad olam. I will give everything, all of this, to you and to your progeny for all time. V'samti et zaracha ka'afar haaretz, asher yuchal ish limnot et afar haaretz, gam zaracha yimaneh. So here's the reference right here, first time. Kumi dalech ba'aretz la'or kol rach b'gil chayit nena. Go this way and that. Vayel Avram vayavo vayishav ilani mamre asher bechevron vayiven sham mizbeach laHashem. Firstly, obviously, the promise of the land here is much more detailed than we had it earlier at the beginning of Parshat Lecha. We're in studying Lecha today, but I'll draw your attention to two things. Number one, already the comparison to Afar Haaretz. Now, it's not exactly the Chol Asher al Sfat Hayam. That's going to come a little bit later. And there actually is a distinction, truth to tell, between Afar Haaretz and the Chol Asher al Sfat Hayam. Come back to that. But also, you are a Jew living at the time of Shlomo HaMelech, and you are from the tribe of Yehuda, and you read these psukim in Parshat Shavua, Parshat Lech Lecha. What do you think? Where was David HaMelech, the beginning of Malchut Beit David? Where was he the king for 7 years before he moved to Yerushalayim? Where does Avram Avinu go at the end?
It was in Hebron.
Bidiyuk. And where does Avram Avinu go and move right after this promise? He goes to Hebron. So you're a Jew, you're going to hear the Parshat Shavua. By the by, it's not clear they had Parshat Shavua like we have it back in the days of the Tanakh, because there are two traditions. One is that it was a weekly reading, and one a weekly reading of the Parsha as we have it, the annual cycle, the Simchas Torah every year. And the other one was a triennial cycle where they read a third each week. It was still a Torah portion, it was still Shabbat, but Lo ad kedei kach, because only a section, whatever it is. You're a Jew, and you get to this portion of the Torah reading. Oh, and I live in Hebron. Look how important Hebron is. Hebron is the root, is the seat, is the source, and that's why Avram Avinu took his tent as soon as he heard about that we're going to get the land. He should look all around, and he moved to Hebron. But I'm very important. You understand? Now, Hebron's very important. It's not Yerushalayim, but it's very important. Now, just to recognize that's there. Now flip to next week's Parsha, chapter 22, another section we know very well. We just finished learning it not too long ago. It's at the end of chapter 22 in Sefer Bereshit. We have the second time that there's a reference to the sand of the sea. And now it's the sand of the sea, the same formulation that we have right now. And that is on page 22 in the Koren Tanakh, chapter 22, verse 17. Shem promises Avram Avinu, Ki varech avarechecha, v'harba arbet zaracha kechuvei hashamayim, v'chachol asher al sfat hayam, v'yira zaracha itshar oivav. So here, You will be as the sand of the sea, and your progeny will inherit the gates of their enemies. V'yitbarechu v'zaracha kol goyei haaretz eikav sheshamat b'koli. And through your progeny will all of the nations of the land be blessed on account of the fact that you listened to what I commanded you. All the nations, including all the nations maybe who are going to at some point be so thankful and living under the thumb in a certain way of what the Romans might have called Pax Judaica instead of Pax Romana or Pax Americana. We have Pax Judaica or Pax Judea. We have here the reality of blessing being brought to others and the inheritance of the gates of one's enemies. And of course, the comparison to the Choloshos Vadayam. Fast forward to chapter 32, to the other time this promise happens. If we open up there, we find in Pasuk 13, the tefillah of Yaakov Avinu. He's davening to Hashem. And he's reminding Hashem that he has received a promise. And the promise is specifically this comparison. At the top of page 38 in the Koren Tanakh, Hebrew English, Koren Tanakh, chapter 32, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Again, a promise, and it has to do with like the sand of the sea. And of course, the fulfillment of it comes about page 407, and back in Melachim Alef. We come back around to the same concept. Now, the way we left things last week was actually in reference to 12 tribes, each having a governor, but not really 12, because the one that was missing was Shevet Yehuda. And that, again, as a bone of contention. What's interesting is the Netziv Asher Ba'aretz is variously understood. I'll put it up on the screen. The Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin tells us, "My mashma dahai Netziv lishna diyarchahu." How do we know that Netziv, one who is a representative, or a governor of some sort, is the language of a month? Because it says, "Ushlomo shnei masar nitzavim al kol Yisrael." The Kilkulat HaMelech. Sorry, I'll make it larger so that everyone can see it. Pardon me. Move that away. Make it larger. Okay, I hope this is better. So there's 12, one for every month. And wait a minute, it also has a 13th. When it's Tzivachad Asher Ba'aretz. Rav Yehuda v'Rav Nachman. Chad Amar Echad Memuna Al Kulam. There was one that was like the boss of all the bosses. He was in charge of all of them, and he's not one of the 12. He's above them. The Chad Amar Keneged Chodesh Ibur. In an Ibur year, when it's going to be a leap year, such as our year this year, they needed a 13th month, so that had a 13th representative. We don't know where he's from. Rashi has the same thing quoted here on the page. What's interesting is that the quotation he has here, Rav and Shmuel. I wasn't able to find it in Mamarei Chazal. Rashi might have another manuscript. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. So here's like other Chachamim, neither here nor there, but I just thought it was interesting. Here it's Rav Yehuda Rav Nachman. But either way, it's either one who's in charge of all of them, or one who is because of the Chodesh Ibur. Now, in Dat Mikra makes the claim that actually this is a reference to the tribe of Yehuda, and that Yehuda sometimes was just called Haaretz, in the same way that Yerushalayim sometimes it is called the city, Ha'ir. Lahavdol Fe'avdalot. When I first moved to Chicago, a few years ago now, people would make reference to, where do you work? I work in the city. I was always thinking, you commute to New York? On the East Coast, if you say the city, you mean New York. And I'm not even from New York. I thought to myself, look how New York centric I became. Asham, New Bagad, New Gazan, right? But when they said the city, I was thinking, oh yeah, that's New York. So lahavdol again, in the ancient Near East, particularly in Eretz Yisrael, say the city, you mean the city. Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh. There's no other city. The city. So what is the Aretz, the land? The land, the state, like the you would say the capital district and the surrounding environs, that's Eretz Yehuda. It's a very nice idea. I don't know if anyone in Chazal say it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. Dat Mikra quotes that in the Assyrian Empire, in the Assyrian records, when they would refer to the kings of Ashur, they would refer to them being living in Haaretz and ruling over Haaretz. It doesn't mean they ruled over all of the earth. It means they ruled over their area. And there are other examples as well. The Romans apparently would refer to Rome as the city, Ha'ir. So it makes sense that should be the case. And they do point out that when Chazal say that there are 70 names for Yerushalayim, one of the names of Yerushalayim actually is Ha'ir. Therefore, it's not such a stretch to say that in Sivachad Ba'aretz, means the Aretz being Eretz Yehuda. Choliot. I don't know. Choliot. Okay. But something else also to see here about the description. When we talk about the idea of them being like the sand of the sea, that implies strongly that we don't know how many Jews there are. How many Jews are there? Oh, like the grains of sand of the sea. Yeah. Here's Bamidbar Rabbah. Rav Menachema B'Shem Rabbi Bibi, Rabbi Chia Rabbah B'Shem Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Nimshli Sol Kechol. The Jewish people are compared to sand. If you go to the beach and you dig a hole, you come the next day, the sand already filled it in. So when were all of those thousands who were lost, who were absent in the time of David, when were they filled back in? In the days of Shlomo. Shenamar, as it says, Yehuda v'Yisrael Rabim Kechol Yam Asher Al Hayam Larov. Right? There's so many Jews in the world. It's like the sand that are in the sea and near the sea. What's the thousands that were lost? So we forget because it's a long time for us. It's a few months, but it's a long time in our mind's eye to hark back to the reality that there was a plague at the end of Sefer Shmuel Bet. You might recall in chapter 24, described there in longhand. And we're talking about a lot of casualties, a lot of people who died from the nation. Yeah, there are many tens of thousands of people who died. So the people are hurting. They lost a lot of people. But when was it filled back in, so to speak? Not that people were replaced, but there was a feeling again that the people were not laid low, but that they were, again, a robust group. And there was a population, that was whole once again, the days of Shlomo. What I find interesting, a theme that we will pass through, like we'll thread it through like the thread, we're with the needle, we're passing it through everything we learn, is the degree to which Shlomo fills in that which was lacking from the days of his father, of David. His very name, Shlomo, has the connotation, of course, of shalom, peace, but also of shlemut, of wholeness. And Shlomo is shalem. We'll see that there is a certain ephemeral quality to his wholeness, but that he is in many ways filling in whatever was left undone by his father, or his father set the stage for, but never completed. Rabbi Elazar b'Shem Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra adds in this medrash, Kol zman sheninu Yisrael letzorech lo chasru. When the Jewish people were counted for a purpose, they did not miss anyone, means they didn't lose anybody. Shelo tzorech chasru. But if it was for no purpose, or not a good enough purpose, they lost many, right? Ve'ez zman nimnu letzorech b'mei Moshe b'tegalim. V'chiluk ha'aretz. V'shelo letzorech b'mei David. The counting the days of Moshe for the flags, and then to divide up the land. So that's once in Parshat Bamidbar, and this is, of course, the Medrash Rabbah on Parshat Bamidbar. The second one in Parshat Pinchas. That's required. The first one in the second year in the desert. The second one in the 40th year in the desert. But which one was not for any purpose? Chapter 24, the last chapter of Sefer Shmuel Bet, when David HaMelech counted the people. Okay, so that's the description. Let's go back to the Navi. We'll learn a few more psukim inside. Let me pause here. Questions, comments, and thoughts before we go further. The strong silent types today on the call. Good, fine. So page 408, I already went to the wrong parak myself. The top of the page, we continue. Vayihi lechem shlomo liyom echad shloshim kor solet shishim kor kamach asara vakar briim v'esrim bakar re'i ume'at son levad me'ayil utzvi v'yachmur ubarburim avusim kihu, meaning Shlomo, sorry, there's a lot of bread. We're talking about a tremendous amount of bread made with fine flour. We take for granted that we can go to the store and there's enriched flour this way and this kind of flour. There's whole flour. Fine flour was a commodity, of course, back in the day. Of course, in Chicago, it's the commodities market. It's well known to many of us. But the point is, it's a feature not only of the quantity but the quality as well. And all these different kinds of animals, varying animals. And the Da'at Mikra actually gives you all the pictures of all the various kinds of animals who are at the table of Shlomo. You know, the gazelles and all the different types of deer and geese, everything that they had, right? Why? Kihu rodeh b'chol ever hanar mitifsach ve'ad Aza, because Shlomo is the ruler from Tifsach to Aza. Aza is like today, Gaza. And he's everywhere, Aver Hanar. What's Aver Hanar? Everything that's over the river. What's the river? We have the city, we have the land. The river was the greatest river known to antiquity, the Euphrates. It's the Nahar. B'chol malchei Aver Hanar. V'shalom hayalo mikol avarav misaviv. And he had peace, King Shlomo, King Shalem, King Hamelach Shalom Shalo, referring to Hashem as the king to whom belongs peace. But he, Shlomo HaMelech, down below, Malka de Ara, Kineged Malka de Rakia, the kingdom down below as against the kingdom on high, right? But the bridge goes both ways, so to speak. So he had peace from all that was around him. He called Avarav Misiviz surrounding environs. Vayeshev Yehuda v'Yisrael avatach ish tachat gafno v'tachat te'inato midan ve'ad Beershava kol yemei Shlomo. Now I should point out here, obvious, Yehuda and Israel distinguished as two separate entities. They sat with security, every man under his grapevine, and each one under their fig tree. Da'at Mikra points out that in the ancient Near East, this motif of the being under the Geffen and under the Te'ina comes up again and again and again, because that was the expression of peace, prosperity, largesse, whatever you want to say, and the capacity to give to others because one has plenty. Midan va'ad Beershava, kol yemei Shlomo. From Dan in the north and Beersheva down south, and we learn all the days of Shlomo. Who's writing all the days of Shlomo? Obviously, it's in retrospect. The book is written in retrospect. That's, by the by, how we're referring to Yehuda and Israel. When you and I read it, we're reading with naive, fresh eyes, and we have to remind ourselves, oh, there was going to be a split between Yehuda and Israel. But the truth is, most of us know what's coming when the chapter 11 of the book of Melachim Alef happens. It's actually in chapter 11, the split. And when that split happens, now we read the book with an air of nostalgia, a wistfulness. Yehuda and Israel. Remember when they used to get along? They used to have bitachon together, and they set levetach, and they were all the days of Shlomo in peace. Halavai, we could go back to those halcyon days. So let me pause here. Questions, comments before we delve into the next layer here. Okay, so this piece should remind us also of Psukim in Tanakh, of the fulfillment of various moments, if you will, that came early in Jewish history. Open your Tanakh, go to the book of Vayikra And in chapter 25, we have what is known as the words of covenant from the Brit Sinai. Here now with not just the curses of the Tocha, but the blessings as well. Chapter 25, verse 3. If you listen and you walk in my statutes, you follow, guard my mitzvahs, and you do them. So what will I do? A whole list of different blessings. I'm just stating them very loosely. I'll read two psukim. The rain's the right time. We learn you'll be with a state of security. Why? Because there will be economic prosperity. The rain falls in its right time. The grain grows, the fruit grows, and the trees of the forest gives its fruit. Everybody's happy, and we have the harvest and the like. Verse 6 and onward, military peace, political peace, I should say. Right? You're going to get what you desire, right? The prosperity, right? Actually, I put in the sources here. I can edit it while we go. It's the benefit of being on Zoom. It's 8 and 9, not 18, 19, right? So we have here, how great will it be? You'll have everything you want. I'll give you whatever you need. And verse 9, the key line, Ufaniti alechem, v'ifreiti etchem, v'yirbeti etchem, v'akimoti et briti etchem, I'll fulfill my covenant with you. What covenant? Seems pretty obvious. It's the covenant he's talking about right now. Seems obvious. But there is another layer that's going on here. And that other layer has to do with, and again, you can keep reading, right? Let me read. I skipped a pasuk. Right? You'll eat the old from the old crop because you'll have a lot stored, and you'll have to take it out because there's even a new crop that you're bringing in. I will place my dwelling place in your midst, and I will be God. I will not abhor you, right? Instead, I will walk in your midst. It sounds, you could almost say, Edenic. It's Edenic in nature. You will be my nation. I will walk in your midst. I will be your God. You will be my nation. I will cause you to walk upright and proud. And I broke that which was around your neck. And here we are. And the people who are hearing this lived through it, didn't they? They lived exactly through this. And what we have in this description, an Edenic description, the brit is not just the brit of I will keep my covenant with you. That is the covenant that is now in the place of the Brit Sinai, right? But there's something else. There's another brit. Maybe a brit that came earlier. Maybe a brit that's in another Sefer. Anything ring a bell of another brit that may be described in these psukim?
Avoid ben Abtarim.
Oh, Tzipora, 10 points. Everybody turn back to Breshit, chapter 15. We open up Breshit, chapter 15, and we read Parshat Shavua. Ani matzhir, I affirm, I did not plan this. Ze kacha ze yatsa lanu, min hashamayim. I did not plan it this way. I didn't think we have to be at this chapter, Parshat Lach Lecha. But
Itzliach lanu.
But just so everybody knows, for your Shabbat table, anyone you encounter, they say, what do you see in Parshat Lech Lecha? I have a lot to tell you. Look at chapter 15. Open chapter 15. We have here, Brit Ben Abitarim starts chapter 15, the beginning, verse 14. I'm not going to read the whole Brit. We'll skip right to the promises, right? Chapter 15, Pasuk 18. After they're going to be enslaved and they're going to come out, Pasuk 18, Bayomahu, on that day, Karat Hashem et Avram, Brit Lemor. L'zarachan atati aretz hazot, minahar Mitzrayim, ad nahar gadol nahar Prat. I'll give them from the river of Egypt until the river Euphrates. And then it tells you the various nations, including these nations, the Canaanite, the Kenizi, the Kadmoni, a big discussion. Who are they? Then the Chiti, the Prizi, the Rephaim, the Emori, the Knani, the Girgashi, the Yevusi. Now, look on the screen with me at the map. Here's the map. The map of the description is Hashem tells them, Minahar Mitzrayim. Nahar Mitzrayim is probably this, the Nachal Mitzrayim, Nahar Mitzrayim. Some say it might be this. Nachal Mitzrayim could be this. Nahar Mitzrayim, Nachal Mitzrayim is either this or it's this. And where does it go to? This is the map from the Atlas Dot Mikra for chapter 15 in Sefer Breshit. Here's the Euphrates. What did we find out? What did we find out in chapter 5 of Sefer Melachim Alef? Go back to chapter 5, verse 1. Mina Nahar, from the river, then inclusive of Eretz Plishtim. Who's Eretz Plishtim? Yafo, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Aza. And until where? Gvul Mitzrayim. Again, either here or here. Who pays tribute? All of these people. Everyone in this whole region that I have here on the screen. From this dotted line to this dotted line, pretty much. The fulfillment of the Brit Ben Abitarim comes to its fullest expression in these psukim. Now, the truth is, the Brit that's being referenced on chapter 26 in Sefer Vayikra, there's a discussion, and one could make the argument the Brit here is actually a description of the Brit, according to Rashi, at least over there. It does refer to a new Brit, right? A new Brit, meaning in the wake of Cheta Egel. Okay, well, whatever it is, yeah. There's something going on, we understand, in these psukim. We finally came to the zenith, and what Hashem told Avram Avinu, it's going to be like the sand of the sea. Shoin. That's what happened. Yeah. And the idea that there will be peace after conflict, it happened. And the idea that Hashem reminds the people in Vayikra, this is after I broke the yoke around your neck of Egypt. What is he reminding them? You were in the yoke of Egypt. Who did I promise that to? That you'd be in a yoke, that you'd be slaves? Obvious. I told you you're El Tezeda. I told Avram Avinu. Yeah. Now, the idea here also what's going on in chapter 26 in Sefer Vayikra is the mention of I will place my Mishkan in your midst. Means I will walk in your midst. How does that happen? How do we get there? What needs to happen, right? So the next logical step about what needs to be built in order to facilitate that existence. Yeah. So skip with me, chapter 12 of the book of Dvarim. In chapter 12 of Sefer Dvarim, we learn the steps of how it's supposed to go. Chapter 12, I'm going to say Sefer Shoftim, it's not going to help. Sefer Dvarim, chapter 12. It is here that the Jewish people find out. Page 226 in the Koren Tanakh. It's in Parshat Re'eh. Chapter 12 in Sefer Dvarim, Pasuk Yud. Va'avartem et ha'yarden, v'yishavtem ba'aretz, asher Hashem Elokeichem anchil etchem, v'heniach lechem mikol avichem misaviv, v'yishavtem betach. The language is the language that we have here also of v'yishavtem betach, page 408 Sefer Melachim Alef, chapter 5. Vaya hamakom asher yivchar Hashem Elokeichem lishakein shemo sham taviu shama taviu eit kol asher anochi mitzvetchem ulotechem v'zivchechem masorotechem utrumat yedchem b'chol mivchan yidrechem asher tidru laHashem usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem atem uvneichem v'notechem v'avdechem v'amhotechem v'alevi Hashem b'sharichem ki ein lo nachala ein lo chilik v'nachala itchem, etc., etc. What are we seeing right here in these psukim? We're seeing the idea that when you no longer have enemies around you, i.e., you get to that moment of Pax Judea, you can now go build a mikdash. And one of the things chapter 5 highlights, the beginning. Look how much food and how much plenty, and everybody is eating and drinking, and besimcha. But it's not a smach mufnesh l'keichem, because they don't yet have the mikdash. In other words, the subtlety of these psukim is look how much prosperity and plenty there is. That's Shlomo Melech says, okay, now I can build. Now I can move, and that's going to be the rest of the parak. Well, not the rest, but soon, later on in the parak, is going to be the initiative to build. In other words, what's the signal to to Shlomo Melech? I really should get rolling and start the building to happening now. The answer is the plenty. The answer is the security. The answer is, the brit with Avram and Hashem was fulfilled. And it took till now, but here it is, right? So when we read all of this and we learn all this whole section and we refer to this portion, you could just say, wow, look how rich they were. It's more than that. It's that actually this is the setup already for what's going to be happening. The Lechem Shlomo, and I mentioned to you before, it doesn't mean that he was a glutton and all the people were just eating and having a festival. It's very likely it means that in the capital district, he fed everybody because of the plenty. There were samach al shulchano. I forgot to show you, by the way, when it mentions in Pasuk Daled, Tifsach, Yehu rodeh b'chol Ever Hanahar, mitifsach vad Aza. So the Tifsach being referenced here, it's not on this map exactly, but it's, if one were to zoom in on Nahar Prat, it's around here. This spot, if you're listening to the audio and you don't have the video, I guess you don't know what I'm talking about. It's just in the southern area. There's a city here called Tifsach. And Aza, of course, is down here. Now, why did it only mention till Aza? I don't know how inhabited the rest of the area was down here, in the area that today we would call, the beginnings of the Sinai Desert area. But it is the Sinai Desert, not the beginning. The Sinai Desert area. It could be there were only roving tribes there. I don't exactly know, but we learned that everyone was bringing him gifts all the way until the Nachal Mitzrayim. By the way, until the Nachal Mitzrayim, but not in Mitzrayim itself. That was a separate entity and a separate empire that still exists. So, I want to also develop another thread that runs through all these prakim. And I don't do it in order to undermine what we're reading, but to show once again that some of the language hints a little bit at the reality that coming to some kind of Edenic existence in this world remained even in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, even when the Jewish people were at the zenith of power, which is not expressed only politically and militarily, but also economically, of course, but also culturally. That it wasn't perfect there either, and that there are hints in the Torah, in the Navi itself, that things were not entirely as they needed to be. Before I open that door, are there questions or comments to this point? Wow, the most silent day we've had in the shir in a long time. Okay, hope it didn't offend anyone. You're just interested and not cowed or feeling stuck. The Mutsudat David has what sounds like it's almost like a throwaway line. I mentioned the first pasuk mean Hanahar, from the river. But then we learn Hayotze mean Ha'eden, Shutchil HaMizrach ad Eretz Plishtim. It reminds us that the Euphrates is one of the rivers that comes out of Eden. Something Edenic about it. The reference in the Pasuk here and it calls it Hanahar, doesn't say Nahar Prat. Again, low shot, you could argue, that's nothing. Just mentioning that's the river. The river everybody knew. That was, you were either from one side of the river or the other side. All the other people called the Mi'aver Hanahar, right? The question is there more going on? So when one looks at Pasuk Hey, chapter 5, verse 5, and it makes reference to every person under their gafen and under their te'ina, I just thought it was interesting that I'm not aware of this reference earlier per se, but it does want to tell us what's the sign of prosperity? Fruit. And if you look back in chapter 26 that we read those psukim before, 25, 26 that we saw, the reference is specifically to the fruits that will grow there. What's interesting is that these descriptions of bread, chita, the bread is described, right? You have the bread, the shloshim kor solet, the shishim kor kamach in verse 2. Then we have all these animals. And then in verse 5 tells you everybody was under their vine branch, their vine and their tree. I just thought it was really interesting that when the Gemara wants to describe to us in Masechet Brachot, there's a description about what bracha you make on various foods. And it mentions that the Perot Haaretz, you can make this bracha. Pshita, it's obvious, in the middle of a discussion of Nachum Bar Yitzchak, Lo nitzrecha el Rabbi Yehuda, damar chita min ilan hi. Rabbi Yehuda has this strange position that actually the chita, wheat, is a type of tree. Why? And so we learn here. The Tanya, ilan she'achal imenu Adam Harishon, the tree that Adam Harishon ate from. Rabbi Meir Omer Geffen Haya. It was grapes. She'ein lecha davar shmevi yilala al ha'adam el yayin. The fact is that the wine, the main drink, brings other than water, brings wailing into the world. As we learn, Shenamar Vayesh min hayayin vayishkar, referring to Noach. Rabbi Nechemia disagrees. Rabbi Nechemia Omer te'ena hi. Shebadavishin kalkulo bo nitkenu. That which they did to destroy, i.e., or to ruin, through eating from a tree, which was they ate the fig, that was the fruit. Shenamar vayitpru ale te'ena. They made themselves fig leaves. They made them into belts, right? Rabbi Yehuda Omer chita haita. It really was a chita. It was not a tree at all. What we would say no, that's a wheat field. It was grain. No, I think it's really like a tree. She'ena tinok yodeli krot abba ve'ima et she'itom tam dagan. A child only learns how to speak once they start eating dagan. They eat grain products. So I just thought this was very interesting that this should be the reference that's what's the word? Sort of milling about, lurking in the shadows here. If this was all it was, of course, everyone would say it's a bit of a stretch. They had bread, and there's in the ancient Near East, like that's what people used to say. Oh, being under your grapevine and under your fig tree means you don't just have basic necessities, but you also have wonderful foods that are themselves delicacies, and they're sweet and they're good, right? But this is all a story about a surfeit of wealth, about an emphasis on Shlomo Amelech's prosperity, and Davka as a form of dominion that he has over the flora and the fauna. And when you keep reading, and here's where it starts taking more and more of a focus. Larry, I'm going to get to you in a half a sec.
No, it's Linda.
Oh, it's Linda. I thought your head is right under the hands.
Oh, sorry.
Linda, give me 1 second. Just look at what you have next. Just look on page 408 if you can see graphically. If not, it's Melachim Alef, chapter 5, verse 6. We learn on verse 6, it tells you also about all of his power, his military power. You can, if you don't relate to what's going on here, just change the word sus for the word tank. Instead of Merkav, it's Merkava. Vayhi lishlomo 40,000 urvot susim lemerkavo, u12,000 parashim, V'chikul nitzavim ha'ele et Shlomo Melech Shlomo, ve'et kol akarev el shulchan HaMelech Shlomo ish chodsho lo ya'adru davar. Everyone who comes to the table that's being fed through these 12 governors, these 12 representatives who collect the taxes, and they bring it in. They always have it. And everyone's on his shulchan who's fed by him. V'asorim ve'ateven lasusim. Look at what the animals have to eat. V'larachesh yaviu el makom asher yesham ish k'mishpato. So each one was given it, for the stable. Then we have Pasuk Tet. Vayitin Elohim chachma lishlomu tvuna harbe me'od v'rochav lev kachol asher asfat hayam. What does Shlomo have? We learned it already a few prakim ago. He has wisdom. He has so much wisdom. And how much wisdom does he have? How much dominion does he have through his mind? You could say through his chachma, which is what's going on here. Bater of chachmat Shlomo, mechachmat kol bnei kedem, mekol chachmat Mitzrayim. He's got more knowledge than the people who are bnei kedem, means the people who are to the east of the river. And he's got more than the people who are in Mitzrayim to the west of the river in Mitzrayim. We'll come back to this psukim, I just want to show you the skira. He has a greater wisdom than all these other wise people, whoever they are. We'll come back to the time. What else does he have mastery over? He makes allegories. He makes proverbs. And he's got thousands of them. He can speak about what's the word, with great expertise about the flora and the fauna, about all the different kinds of animals. They all came to hear about the wisdom of Shlomo. Now, it's not quite the Eitz Hadat Tov Vara, but it's interesting that the intellectual prowess, the wisdom of Shlomo, that's what everyone comes to focus on and to learn about. And again, it's about his greatness, there's his intellectual acumen, and it's an export. So people are coming to be able to hear about the ideals of this grand king, and what he stands for is ethical monotheistic ideals that he wants to teach people, and about behavior generally, but through the prism of Torah and mitzvot, etc. Okay, Linda, I made you wait so long. I'm sorry. Please.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I okay? It just, this whole idea of the Edenic, the Eden, all of the language, the thing about Elan and the bread and the when the wisdom, when they eat from the tree of knowledge, and this is all perverted and this is all gone awry, then the language still follows. It's the punishment of Adam is that he's going to have to toil to
get his bread and
get his bread. So there's the bread, and then of course all the wisdom goes wrong.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So
and we're going to see that. I'm saying I'm kind of planting the seeds because that's what's going to be happening, right?
Yes. Well, the seeds are growing.
The seeds are growing. You see what happens, and again, it's not. I'm not suggesting that the whole of Perek Hay is basically like some cynical look how bad it was. No, it was great. It was amazing. But there's a very, very small fissure in this diamond. And that fissure, unfortunately, soon becomes a chasm. It's like it breaks. It's going to hew it exactly as you're saying. It sort of falls after in terms of you're going to have to toil for the bread, etc. But I'll go one step further about this. It's verses 6 through 8. It tells you how many horses he had. He's got tons and tons of horses, right? And he's done this in order to have great military power. Now we know, the Torah tells us in chapter 17, open the Tanakh, chapter 17 of the book of Devarim. Everybody knows this. We've studied this many times, and I'm surprised no one mentioned it until now or shouted it out, but I guess left to me. Chapter 17, we learn about the limits on a king's power, right? So chapter 17, verse 16. Rak lo yirbelo susim. But he shouldn't have too many horses. And then we learn, he should not go back to Egypt. That was the main place where they got horses. Don't go back to Egypt to get horses. Because God said to you, don't go back in this way. And I'll read it as a run-on sentence to the next Pasuk. Right? So he should also not have too many wives. And he should not have too many wives, lest they bring his heart away. They'll move his heart away from his connection to Hashem, right? And everybody knows what we already read a few chapters ago. Who did he marry? Shlomo? Later on it's going to say he has 1,000 wives, right? But now, the princess of Mitzrayim. He's wedded to Mitzrayim. And where did he go to get his horses? No doubt. The Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin. Right? This is a broader discussion, but it says specifically, Rabbi Yehuda brings this up. Yet in Divrei Hayamim, it's going to say, Arbat Alafim Arayot, meaning Arayot Susim. So how could it be? He has all sorts of stalls, for the horses and the chariots, and it gives a number, and then it gives another number. Yeah. So they explain. Imar ba'im Alef itztabla ot hayu kolach arbat alafim arayot susim. So he had all these. These are actually stables and stalls. It figures out, right, this whole thing. Imar arbat alafim itztabla ot hayu lo. If you want to say the opposite, so each one was gigantic. Each one had 40,000 horses within it. Yeah, it could go each way. So the Gemara sort of reconciles. Why does it say two different numbers? One is the number of stables. The other one is stalls within those stables. Some astronomical number. Rav Yitzchak Rami, K'tiv ein kesef nachshav b'yimei Shlomo l'ma'uma. Silver was like nothing in the days of Shlomo. Larry, give me 1 minute just to finish the source. I'm happy to take your comment. 1 second. Uchtiv, and it says, "Vayitin Shlomo kesef b'Yerushalayim ka'avanim." But it was given it out. The silver was nothing, and then it sounds like there's so much silver everywhere. They're giving it out. Lokashia, Kan kodem shenasa Shlomo bad paro. Kan la'ach shenasa Shlomo bad paro. One was before he married Paro's daughter. The other was after he married Paro's daughter. It's a hinge moment. The marrying of Paro's daughter changed how things are to be understood in terms of the value of money, etc. Yeah. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, V'shashinasa Shlomo et bat Paro. At that moment that Shlomo married the daughter of Paro, Yarad Gavriel, v'ni'etz kana b'yam. The angel Gavriel came and took a massive reed for Gavriel, a malach rather large, and he stuck it in the ocean. The hela sirton, and around it, the dirt started to sort of coalesce. The alav nivneh krach gadol sheberomi. And when was Rome built? Rome was founded at the moment Shlomo married the daughter of Paro. You'll say to me, excuse me, Rome is a backwater and will be a backwater until such time as it will arrive on the scene as a force in about 8 centuries. But what's the point? The roots of it, the start of it, and what's Rome? Of course, the great and terrible legacy of Rome from a Jewish perspective is Korban. The beginning of Korban, it's already at the wedding. Now, Rav Meidan, I'm coming to you in half a sec. Just want to fill at one point. Rav Meidan, when he learns this parak, he says, look, there's not a number of horses that you can or can't have per se in the Pasukim themselves. How many, every country has to ask themselves, how many tanks do we need? How many submarines do we need? But you understand, when you have a gigantic army, no one's going to attack you. That's how you have peace. It's the peace of deterrence. You have weaponry that the enemies say, we can't win. So they dress all sorts of reasons they say, but it has to do with being able to also feel like We can't win, so there's no point. And this is an example of how this is sandwiched in, though, with the prosperity, right? And if you look in those Pasukim, chapter 17, he shouldn't have too much, shouldn't overdo it in three things, right? So one is the horses, but two is the women, and three is the money. And Shlomo has all those things. Now, how did Shlomo reconcile that? The answer, of course, we already know because we learned many Divrei Torah in the past. He used his intellect to justify how the Pasukim don't really apply to him because he knows the reason for it. It's not going to be his problem. We're going to come to those Gemaras when we get to chapter 11, when the actual split happens, and when things are running awry, they're falling to pieces. We'll go back to that and see it inside. But you should be aware of it outside. What's going to get him in trouble? His great wisdom, his ability to look at a pasuk and to tear it apart and deconstruct it becomes part of the undoing. And when you're looking in Sefer Melachim, you see that it's there. The bread and the gefen and the te'ina and the prosperity and the simcha, but without the Mishkan Hashem, meaning the mikdash hasn't been built yet. So that, we got to build it. Then he has all these horses. Where are horses procured in the ancient Near East? Predominantly, they come from one place, a place where he has great diplomatic relationships. And in the world of international relations, he's actually quite literally related to Egypt. And it says, shouldn't have too many wives. They shouldn't bring his heart away. So he married the daughter of Paro. Now, what if I told you that the Zohar HaKadosh and many Sifrei Kodesh refer to Paro oftentimes as the Nachash? Simon? Paro he calls himself the Tanin Hagadol in Sefer Yechezkel. He's the great serpent or the great crocodile. So they're all from the same mishpacha, if you will. So they call him, he's like the Nachash. Now, the truth is they're probably more referring to the Nachash, to the Paro of the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. But the point is, that's the Pharaoh. That's his job. Helps you turn away from God. And it doesn't mean that the Pharaoh was sending messages to Shlomo. You understand? You should really move away from God. But let me sell you some horses, because you know what's going to protect you? Your army. But that's not what it says in Sefer Vayikra in chapter 26, is it? Absolutely not. It says if you listen to the mitzvahs, Hashem will give you peace. If you listen to the mitzvahs, you'll have security. If you listen to the mitzvahs, you'll have the prosperity. But Shlomo HaMelech has a gigantic army. And of course, Rav Meidan, in his special way, he can say, I can't say, but I'm sort of quoting him. He says, every nation today should ask itself how many tanks it needs to build. And what does it mean when it gets its armaments from another nation, however wonderful that nation might be? And what does it mean when that same country, he said, is buying submarines from Germany and is reliant on its army and on its technological prowess to be able to maintain a QME, that's my language, but he said it in Hebrew, a qualitative military edge. That will save us. We need an Iron Dome, we need this, that, etc. Yeah, that's what we need. Shlomo Melech is an army. He has everything he needs. And again, you could say, well, he has to do with Ishtadlut. Sure, he does. But what was the balance between doing his part, Bahai Alma in the Malka as the Malka Da'ara, as the king here on earth, as opposed to how much you had to rely on the Malka, the Rakia. And this does not take anything away from Shlomo Melech. The great Shlomo HaMelech, who is the Mechaber of Sifrei Kodesh, of Shir Hashirim Kodesh Kodashim, is the Mechaber Sefer Mishlei, with the Mishalim that we have that continue, that we still have, but it seems there were many, many, many more that are described here in Perek Hay. And then, of course, we get to the idea of the book of Kohelet, the wisdom for the people, according to the Netziv and others. That's what he shared with the nations of the world when they would come on Chag HaSukkot, the collected drushes that Shlomo Melech gave to the kings of the world when they would come to learn from his wisdom. That's the Divrei Kohelet ben David. He was the intelligence gatherer, and he would parcel it out to the nations of the world. Larry, you've been so patient. Over to you, Larry, and then Shoshi, I see your hand is up, and then Debbie, in that order. Larry, Shoshi, Debbie. Larry, go ahead.
Related, going back to Perek Vav, Rabbi Steinsaltz's commentary shows or states, in referring a reference to Perek Yud, 28-29, Chavchet Chavtet, that the horses were not just military, but was also a significant source of income. He was a major trader in horses.
Who was?
Shlomo.
Oh, Shlomo. Yeah, we're going to see he made a bit. He's not going to make it into a business.
As Israel has with weapons.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
He's running. He brings them in, but then he breeds them. He figures it out, and then he's,
and he said what he says is he sold them in the north.
Yeah, we're coming to it.
He brought them from
Right. But you understand though. In other words, why was Shlomo able to build a mikdash? Because he didn't have to worry he was going to get attacked. And why was he able? We'll see next. He's going to make this covenant with Hiram Melech Tzor. We have to understand who is that and why is that. And coming attractions. I can't hold myself back. I'm saying it right now, but I'm not filling it out at all. The whole story with Hiram Melech Tzor is going to be about what? About cutting down trees and bringing trees. It's a big focus on the trees. Why is that? We'll come back to it. I won't say any more, but it's going to be an import-export business. He's doing the export soon. Indeed. Okay, Shoshi and then Debbie, please go ahead.
So no, I just wanted to mention that we described Shlomo. Hashem loves him because he goes b'chukos David Aviv, right? It doesn't say. It says the only thing that he did wrong was the bomos. Okay, like he didn't build the Beis Hamikdash, right? So it doesn't say the only thing he did wrong was, he did the Susim and the Nashim. And again, like we said many weeks ago, right? Shlomo as Paro. He married the wife, but he married Paro.
That's it.
He married Paro.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say that Hashem was angry about that.
This is a very important point you're making. The Navi is not overtly critical of Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo keeps filling in the gaps of David. And we know that the Navi is very well able. All Naviim are so critical of kings, right? Mm-hmm. But somehow Shlomo, we have to ask the question, why does he seem to be getting a bit of a pass, at least on the level of Pshat? We will soon see that Chazal will be showing us that, in fact, he did not get a pass, but that the criticism, for some reason, and that's going to be sort of the $64,000 question when we get to the end of the story of Shlomo, we're up to Rechav Am. Why wasn't Hashem harsher with him on the level of Pshat? Like, why were there no Nevi'im saying to him, what's going on here? So on the level of Pshat, the answer is, come on, Tzvi Engel's grasping at straws over here to connect it to some other story and this and that. But when you open the Gemaras, we're not up to them yet, which I'm deliberately like holding them back. I gave you a preview. There's going to be the one where it's his intellect that got him in trouble. It's his smarts. He's too smart for his own good. Chazal will say this overtly. The Torah says not too many wives. I have 1,000 wives. He said it won't be no, it's not going to apply to me. But it applied to you. Yeah. I'm going to marry the daughter of Paro. We're not going to go back there. But you did go back there. I mean, going back to Mitzrayim, you should realize, and Rav Meidan makes this point very strenuously, doesn't mean that everyone picks up and moves back to Egypt. It means that you see Egypt as your protector, as somehow the one that provides for you, and not Hashem. And that should never be.
Well,
your question is an excellent one. And the question right now, I guess, is on me, because I haven't opened the Gemaras, except to give you that preview. We saw one little example, by the way, last go around, last year. Shlomo has like an encounter with the Malach HaMavet. Like, why is he having a discussion with the Samach Mem? What is that about? But we'll see that it's a harbinger of other things to come, involving Shlomo Melech, which will not be in the Pshat. And I will venture to argue it's deliberate. There's something about Shlomo that has to be protected on and on. L'ol me'ad. But I don't want to give too much away because I want you to come back next week. Okay. Debbie, go ahead, please.
So you took a bunch of wind out of what I wanted to say.
Sorry.
Because, obviously his father, my favorite David, was treated very differently. And Shlomo, for now, I agree with you totally. The wisdom that they agreed on, Hashem and he, that he was granted, sometimes he used in a very bad way. That won't affect me. That doesn't really apply to me. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to when, because like I said, you said a lot of what I was
Okay.
going to
Baruch
say.
Shekivanti,
about
you had your hand up
Shlomo,
first. So
although he-
I was just quoting you. I didn't realize. Okay, we're gonna stop the shear here. I'm
I
gonna close
can
out the shear
share
here.
that even over Zoom with you.
Yeah, well, listen, it's good. We're sharing, Listen, so I'm
Yeah.
closing out the shear right now, but I just want you to realize, as we're saying goodbye, nothing that I'm saying today should be construed as an overt criticism. Like Shoshi pointed out, like Debbie's pointed, like if the Navi wanted to say, and the Navi came and he said, Shlomo, how dare you? It was so much more subtle than that. And at this moment, on the level of shot, you have to like look for it. But I'm showing you that the clues are already in the making here, so that when we get to chapter 11, we won't say, what? Over Bamut? Because some foreigner made a Bama? What, there's no slums in the best place in the world, in a slum, a house of ill repute, or someone made some idolatrous thing in a corner, it's on him? It didn't start there. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back. There's a lot of other things happening, and this is already laying the groundwork. Anyway, God willing, we'll resume next week, same time, same channel. And at that time, we'll start to look more in depth at these psukim, and particularly to go into what's going on with Hiram Melech Tzor, starting in verse 15. I just also call your attention to an old shiur, which was on Tu B'Shvat of this past year. Our shul did a scholar in residence kind of joint program where I spoke in Yerushalayim via Zoom, and the Tu B'Shvat shiur, was very much bound up with the wisdom of Shlomo being able to speak to and to export his wisdom to the nations of the world from Yerushalayim, and the export not only of his wisdom, but his ability to communicate somehow some truths or some knowledge about, or even with, the flora and the fauna of the world. So if you're interested in that shiur, it's on YouTube, on that YouTube channel over there. Look for the Tu B'Shvat shiur. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's from around January or something. Anyway, that's all we have time for today. I wish everyone a good day and a good Shabbos in advance. God willing, next week we'll resume chapter 5, Pasuk Tetvav. We're going to have to fill in some gaps because I skipped a whole lot of psukim to show you the pieces here, Begadol, but we'll drill down with the microscopic, more granular, like the sand of the sea next week.